Every year, Apple releases two sets of brand new iPhones with the regular iPhone series and the Pro iPhone series. And yeah, while this year the Pro model is physically different than the normal iPhone model, in a way, these phones have never been more alike. But still, these phones at the end of the day are made for two different sets of people, and the specs really don't tell the whole story in real-world differences, because I was pretty shocked once I started testing and using these phones. And I want to relay that to you and focus on the key areas that consumers care about and real-world differences between these phones, like the design, the display, connectivity, performance, the camera, the pricing, and of course, everyone knows the big one, battery life, so you can decide between all these factors so you can pick the perfect iPhone. Now, more important than picking the perfect iPhone is picking the right cellular carrier to put on your iPhone, which is why I've partnered with Mint Mobile to tell you how easy it is to switch to Mint Mobile. Especially with these latest iPhones, you can switch to Mint Mobile in minutes without talking to anyone or waiting for a physical SIM delivery, all while keeping your same phone number and contacts. It's completely stress-free. The only difference between Mint and your old carrier is you're getting the fastest 5G network at the lowest 5G prices, with plans starting at just $15 a month. And with the Mint Mobile app and the flexibility of eSIM, you can transfer your line to another phone anytime you want. Trust me, I know it sounds like a pain to switch carriers, but you know what a bigger pain is? Paying overly inflated prices for the same or often worse 5G service. And while so many wireless carriers continue to jack up the price, Mint Mobile has been offering $15 plans for as long as I can remember. In fact, I just came up on my 4-year anniversary of having my Mint Mobile line, and I have not had the price raise once. And if you use my link below, you can save even more by getting 3 months free of Mint Mobile service, so you can see how easy it is to switch for yourself. And thank you to Mint Mobile for sponsoring this video. Okay, let's get down to it. Let's start with the design. Now, don't be fooled, because the last 2 years, the regular iPhone model and the Pro model came with the same exact display sizes. However, this year, Apple is boosting the screen size of the iPhone 16 Pro, moving it from 6.1 inches to 6.3 inches, while the Pro Max moves from 6.7 inches to 6.9 inches. The standard iPhone 16 and the iPhone 16 Plus still come in those old display sizes at 6.1 and 6.7 inches. Now, it's not just the screen size. Even though the iPhone 16 Pro features razor-thin bezels compared to the iPhone 16, the Pro models are physically larger as well. These are the largest iPhones ever, and the extra display space is nice. I especially like it on the smaller 6.3-inch model, which I've kind of dubbed the iPhone 16 Pro Max Mini. It has extra screen real estate without it feeling too big, so you can still use it one-handed, and it enables a more comfortable typing experience as well as getting a big display for watching media. The 16 Pro Max, on the other hand, does feel, very big, but when you're using it two-handed, there's no denying that the 6.9-inch OLED display is gorgeous, and it makes watching video or playing games on it feel much more immersive. And while I thought these display size increases would be seen as a positive feature for the Pro models, I've also seen a lot of backlash against Apple for increasing the size of the Pro phones this year, especially on the Pro Max model. A lot of people agree with me that it is on the verge of being too big, and I think most of us would have been happier with a 6.7-inch size Pro Max phone with razor-thin bezels that made the phone dimensions even smaller than they were last year. Then there's also the weight on the Pros. They actually got heavier this year, so the iPhone 16, the regular model, weighs less because it uses an aluminum side, while the Pros use a heavier titanium material. The normal iPhone 16 weighs 170 grams, while the Pro weighs 199 grams. And in fact, the small Pro iPhone weighs the same as the larger Plus model, while the Pro Max model weighs in at 227 grams. Overall, the iPhone 16 Pros do look and feel more premium than the regular models due to the titanium and the heavier weight, but the iPhone 16 results in a more comfortable experience when holding these phones. They feel lighter, they're easier to hold with an outstretched arm, and easier to handle due to their size. It may be why we're witnessing more orders for the regular iPhone models this year than in years past, although there may be a few more reasons as to why that's happening. Because it could also be that the iPhone 16 has a more vibrant and exciting color choice compared to the 16 Pro, with a new stunning teal, pink, and aquamarine color compared to the more muted options offered on the Pros, like natural titanium, white, black, and the new desert titanium option, which honestly I do kind of like the more muted gold look on this phone because it's not too flashy, but still pretty sophisticated looking. Now, while you may think there's a big display difference this year, in terms of quality, they're both exactly the same. And the new feature on both models, which is really cool, is that they can get to 1 nits of extreme low brightness, which is great if you're opening your phone like in the first thing in the morning or late at night, or God forbid, you have to check your phone at the movie theater. It can be ultra low. You don't have to bother people, but still don't be that person. Focus on the movie, watch the movie. You paid an exorbitant amount for the ticket and the popcorn. Can you please just watch the movie? Can we please not have brain rot for 2 hours? Can we just focus a little bit here, people? Now, while yes, the displays look the same, there are 2 big differences. And that is, of course, just like last year, and for the past few years, the Pro models get a faster 120 Hz refresh rate that results in smoother looking animations and scrolling, while the regular model still runs at 60 Hz. You can really see the difference on this slow motion video where the iPhone 16 Pro apps don't blur while switching to the next app page, while the iPhone 16 one does. Listen, it is nice to have 120 Hz, and it is kind of hard to go back to a phone with 60 Hz when you use them side by side. But like I say every year, even though you have brain rot, your brain does adapt pretty quickly to your screen. So if you're using 60 Hz for a while, you get used to it. And there's still a lot of screens I use in my life that are 60 Hz. My Apple Watch, 60 Hz. Doesn't really bother me. My studio display that I edit all these videos on, 60 Hz. Doesn't really bother me. So I am of the opinion that I would never say 60 Hz is unusable because I deal with 60 Hz displays all the time. And if I force myself to use an iPhone 16 for a week, I would get used to it. Perhaps an even bigger change that I think more users would notice is that the iPhone 16 Pro has an always-on display, while the regular 16 doesn't. And once I got used to an always-on display on my 16 Pro, I kind of miss going back to the normal 16. Especially when I use Apple's standby mode on my nightstand charger, it is a much better feature on phones that have an always-on display. Thankfully, besides those design and display differences, there's also a lot of the same on the iPhone 16 and iPhone 16 Pro. That is because the normal 16 now has an action button which can be mapped to quick commands like launching the flashlight, taking a voice memo, or toggling settings like Do Not Disturb, or really setting it to open any app you want. And both phones this year get a new camera control button, which allows you to press it quickly to open the camera, then you can press it again to take a photo or video, and then you can even press it slightly to activate a new camera menu where you can change it to different quick actions like changing the zoom, the exposure, quick lens changes, focal depth, or changing the color tone. And you can even slide your finger up and down to navigate through this, or use those functions. Like for example, you could just slide your finger up and down to zoom in and out. Another big similarity between the phones this year, and this wasn't true in years past, is the chip, because both phones are getting an A18 chip, and both phones now have 8 GB of memory. So apps stay open long in the background, and navigation on these phones is lightning quick and super snappy. And for most use cases, both phones have the same exact performance. Now, technically, the iPhone 16 Pro does get a more powerful chip. It's an A18 Pro chip. It has 1 more GPU core enabled, but that really only extends itself to like more graphic intensive workflows. I think where average users would notice it the most is gaming. But to be honest, when I was playing games on the 16 and 16 Pro, I didn't really notice too big of a difference. And the 16 can now play those really demanding AAA level games that were exclusive to the 15 Pro last year. But yeah, technically the GPU on the Pro is more powerful. So if you care about having the best frame rates and graphics, I guess it may be a consideration. All right, now you know I saved the last 2 and probably the most important deciding factors for last, because I want you to watch this whole video. Let's talk about the camera and the battery. Let's do it. Let's start with that camera because yeah, both phones this year really feel similar to their camera systems, and both feature a 48 megapixel camera on the main sensor that feels very, very similar to each other. And both take great photos and videos in their default mode, and you get extra resolution on the default mode thanks to Apple providing a 24 megapixel photo where many other Android competitors take those larger sensors and then compress that down to a 12 megapixel photo. This is a huge advantage on the iPhone right now. Both phones also get new settings to change the style of tones of these photos. You can even tweak them to your own specific settings and make a bunch of different profiles or use the preset ones. Now, one big upgrade this year on both 16 models is their ultra wide angle camera, and both for different reasons, because they're not the same ultra wide angle camera. Now, the 16 basically gets the ultra wide angle camera that was on the 15 Pro from last year, and it now includes autofocus, which means you can move your camera really close to a subject and it can still focus, which also means that you can now take macro shots that look really nice and detailed. The ultra wide camera on the 16 Pro also gets a big boost this year, but in a different way, because it now upgrades that 12 megapixel sensor to a 48 megapixel sensor. However, unlike the main sensor, if you don't change the default photo mode, it still brings the final result down to just 12 megapixels, which I feel like really didn't give it a huge difference in photo quality compared to the normal iPhone 16. And I feel like both ultra-wides look very similar, unless you're pixel peeping. That's where this next part comes in though, because one huge advantage on the Pro models is those Pro camera modes that allow you to take more control of the iPhone's camera system, which is not available on the regular 16. For example, you can go into settings and get a Pro RAW photo mode, which gives you the full resolution of the 48 megapixel sensor to gather even more information on that sensor. This works for the main camera and the ultra wide angle camera on the iPhone 16 Pro, and they give you photos with much higher resolution for extra detail. Even on the ultra wide, you can get full 48 megapixel readout, so you can crop in for even more detail. The real magic of using these Pro RAW modes is that you can edit these photos in your own editing application after, where you just have a lot more flexibility in how you want to change these photos. You can change the colors more, the shadows more, the highlights, the contrast, the sharpness, and so many other factors that can take a photo that used to look like this and make it look like this. The same can be said for video modes on the Pro. You get Apple ProRes and log recording, which by default gives you an image that looks gray and washed out. In fact, if a regular user used this feature without editing it after, rightfully, they would think it looks awful. But just like ProRAW photos, ProRes log video gives you a lot more data and a lot more control in post-production when you edit and tune this footage. So you can go for a very specific look or just get a cleaner shot without all of the usual overdone smartphone processing. Now, don't be fooled. These are useful features, but for the vast majority of people, the mainstream audience that uses iPhones, they're never gonna touch these settings. But if you are someone that cares about tinkering with photos and videos, then yes, these settings that are exclusive to the Pro models make them well worth the upgrade over the normal 16. For most users, the normal photo settings on the iPhone 16 will suffice. And yeah, if you want to get even like a full 48 megapixel reading on the normal 16, you can set it to HEIF Max, which does give you lower file sizes, but less control over Pro RAW in the ultimate editing decision. But still, you can take full advantage of that 48 megapixel sensor, which is something a normal user might want to do. That being said, I think there is one big difference on both Pro camera systems this year that make a big difference for normal users, and that is the dedicated 5x zoom lens on the Pro models. This gives you much farther reach than the Max 2x mode on the iPhone 16 and allows you to capture shots that are much farther away. I've really been liking how the 16 Pro Max in particular has been taking these 5x shots this year. They just seem cleaner overall compared to the 15 Pro Max from last year, usually with less noise, and it seems to work better in darker environments. And then you also have the microphone differences that are on the iPhone 16 Pro versus the regular 16. This one's on the 16 Pro. It has a better sounding professional microphone with 4 microphones inside of it. And here is what the regular iPhone 16 sounds like. I'm putting these both in the video unedited so you can decide for yourself how much of a difference the new professional microphones on the 16 Pro make. Oh, I guess I should also point out that the normal 16 still has a low-speed USB 2.0 USB-C port, while the Pro models have a fast 3.1 USB-C port, which can transfer data 20 times faster, which makes sense for Pro users who need to offload and transfer huge files. So if you're someone that ever plugs in a cable to their iPhone to transfer pictures or just files to another device, especially large ones, that is a valid reason to get a Pro. All right, the moment we've all been waiting for, battery life. Which phones have better battery life? And how much better? Well, between the iPhone 16 and the iPhone 16 Pro models, I have to say that despite the 16 Pro having better advertised battery life, they feel like they have about the same battery life in daily usage to me. I feel like I'd probably say maybe the Pro wins out a little bit in battery life, but I mean, maybe like an extra 30 minutes if you're lucky. Now, I don't do battery tests because honestly, there's so many variables that go into battery life testing, and even something like a low cellular connection can affect that. So I know there's a bit of an unfair comparison at times with these battery tests. However, that being said, channels with more resources and time than me, and honestly, less lazy channels like Mr. Who's the Boss, have already done these battery tests. And his results seem to line up with my experience. In fact, the normal 16 and the 16 Pro basically scored around the same 8 hours and 19 minutes of screen on time. Now, you might be surprised to learn that the previous battery champion from last year, the 16 Plus model, is no longer the iPhone with the best battery life. And that's new, right? Like, the past Plus models always had the best battery life, but this time they only get 8 hours and 45 minutes of screen on time. And really, that's just a modest increase over the regular size 16 model. But the Pro Max this year is the battery champ. It lasted for a full 11 hours and 22 minutes, making this the best battery life on an iPhone ever. And when I compare my unscientific battery tests compared to this battery test and others like it, we can see pretty similar reporting that all point to the iPhone 16 Pro Max really having the outstanding battery life gain this year. And that is something to consider if you have battery anxiety like me. And just general anxiety. If you have anxiety, I'm sorry, it's tough. It's tough having anxiety. It's tough, I hate it. So if you're picking between the iPhone 16 and the iPhone 16 Pro, don't be fooled. There's not a huge battery life difference this year. However, if you're getting the Max model over the Plus model, you're going to see a big boost to battery life. So after everything we listed, pros and cons, differences between each model, which iPhone should you get? Well, that all depends. I think most normal users who are looking to save money this year should just get the regular iPhone 16 model. It is well-rounded with features that make it very similar to the Pro models this year, including a fast A18 chip, a great camera system, the action button, and the camera control button. It also gets similar battery life to the Pro model, and the Plus model doesn't get a huge boost in battery life over the regular model this year. However, the iPhone 16 Pro is the better choice for users that want a bigger display, as well as 120 Hz, an always-on display, and the additional 5x lens, or more control over the camera. It's worth the $1,000 starting price point if you care about those features. And if you don't mind spending even more and you want a huge iPhone that's bigger than my head with the best battery life, well, the iPhone 16 Pro Max at $1,200 is probably the one you should go with. It is bigger than my head, right? Yeah, I think. Well, I mean, I got a pretty big head, so maybe not. Of course, though, there is no clear winner here because different users have different needs, and there's advantages and disadvantages to each specific model. But I do hope this video helped you out in deciding between the iPhone 16 and the iPhone 16 Pro. So if you didn't get fooled, like this video. If you want to see more, make sure you're subscribed. And as always, thank you so much for watching, and I'll catch you all in the next one.